Welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People, a podcast about role-playing games and the weird, wonderful people behind them. Hello, wonderful weirdos. This is Diogo Nogueira, and today's guest is a very special guest. I'm talking about Colin Le Sueur, the man behind By Odin's Beard, creator of many Carn adventures and creators of Runecairn, the solo RPG using Carn rules and inspired by soul-like games and North mythology. But before we get into that, I'd like to point you to our show notes where you can find links for everything we talk about the show. And if you like the show, please subscribe it wherever you listen to your podcast so you have updates when we release new episodes. And if you like the show, also leave us a review wherever you listen to it. And if you have any coins left from your last adventure, check out the show notes where you can support the show buying games for myself or paying us a coffee at Ko-Fi. But getting back to Colin Le Sueur, we talked about his games, his RPG origins, who he is outside of role-playing games, how he recharges after gaming, which can be sometimes very draining, especially, for referees, and how he seems like a strange person sometimes because he doesn't listen to music. Friends call him someone from the Footloose dimension, and how he uses the Pomodoro technique to write, how he went to ghost tours and see ghosts. We talked about inspiration, artists, how he really digging in the research to make his games. We talked about his fascination with the mimic monster. He always tries to insert it wherever he writes his stuff in GM games. Talk about wrestling, how he became cynical growing up. He was more a believer, how he deals with meditation, and all very interesting topics to talk about. Great things. So tune in, get weird with us, and let's get weird with Colin Le Sueur. Hello, Colin. Welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People. I'm so happy to have you here. I've been following your work for a while. You've done amazing things. And how are you, my friend? How have you been?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. And I've been following your work for a long time as well. So thanks for having me on, and excited to have a chat.
Yeah. Do you live in France or do you live in the United States?
So I'm in the UK actually.
Oh,
I'm,
okay. Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm originally Canadian.
Oh, yeah. Sorry,
That's
because
fine.
of the name, I
Yeah.
assumed it was France. So, do you speak English and French just as well? Because yeah.
So I grew up speaking French in school. Like I went to school in French
Mm.
till I was about 12 years old. But after that, it's dropped off a lot. So I still can understand a lot of French, but my vocabulary isn't where it was at one point. And so I can kind
Yeah.
of get by, but not great. Not a native speaker, and I speak in a Quebecois accent, so it's a lot of French
Yeah.
people find that odd.
Yeah. It's still useful to read because there's a lot of good stuff in French, so
Hmm.
it's always useful. Uh, Colin, for whoever the weirdos out there that might don't know exactly who you are, and I love hearing from the creators who come here. So, who is Colin Le Sueur? I don't know how to pronounce your last name, so you can teach us that too. So, who
Sure.
are you? What do you do? And if you can share just a small weird detail about yourself, about your life, about the way you do things.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Colin Le Sueur.
Le
The French
Sueur.
pronunciation is Le Sueur, but
Le
it's been
Sueur.
anglicized, so I say Le Sueur. But I'll respond to anything. I've had Le Sueur, I've had Le Sueur, so all sorts of things. But yeah, I'm a tabletop role playing game designer, writer, illustrator, and publisher. I make games like
Everything.
yeah, yeah, all in one. Make games like Runecairn, We Deal in Lead. I've done some Cairn adventures as well. Um, so I publish my games and adventures under By Odin's Beard RPG, and you can find me on social media under that at By Odin's Beard RPG. But yeah, so I'm yeah Canadian designer living in the UK. Um, got back into tabletop games maybe about 5 years ago, after a really long break, about 20 year break. So I got back into it, and now I'm making games and making adventures and having a lot of fun.
Wow, and what made you take a 20-year break from RPGs? Like, what were you playing back then, and what made you stop, and how did you come back to it?
So I started off in the early '90s doing or playing AD&D Second Edition, so Dungeons Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Second Edition.
Hmm.
Um, there was a big spike in like box sets, and so I had the Forgotten Realms box set, Ravenloft, Dark Sun. I was and I would play with my friends. We'd play other stuff like some Palladium games and Heroes Unlimited and TMNT, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and other
Mm.
strangeness. And then so it was really good. It was a lot of fun. I got big into the novels too. But after a while, after high school, it just dropped off. Stopped playing. That was when through third edition was just coming out, and never really got into it. Um, but I decided to come back to it um, in maybe 2015 or 2016, and started playing 3.5 D&D 3.5 just because I wanted to play again. It looked cool. I wanted to scratch that itch and start meeting up with people and playing role playing games again. And went from there to Pathfinder and 5e, and then finally to indie systems like Cairn and Into the Odd.
Wow, and how did you get this desire again? Did you saw people playing role playing games somewhere, or just like, well, now I'm done with college? Because for me, that was kind of that. Like, I stopped during college,
Hmm.
and when I got a job and was earning money for the first time, and then, oh yeah,
Yeah,
now I can buy my books finally. And
yeah.
then I went there and bought a bunch of books and started playing again. How did you rekindle that spark for role playing games? Was just something that now I have time, I will go back, or did you saw someone playing? Did you saw any kind of marketing or anything?
I don't really remember actually. I just remember because I joined a meetup group, like, or sorry, a website called meetup.com, where you could like meet other people and do things like board games. And one of the options was role playing games. Um, and that's what got me back into it. I just saw that, and I saw there was a local
Yeah,
group where I was living then, and I thought, why not? I might as well have a look into it, and went along and met some cool people and had some fun, and then went out and bought the books. So it was that kind of like I guess serendipitous, like seeing the local event. Really, that's what fired up
yeah.
my brain again and said, "Oh, I had a lot of fun doing that before, so why not try again?"
Yeah. Are you still connected to local groups and people in your area that play, or like since you moved, you play more with the internet? How is your relationship with the RPG community where you live?
So I used to be about 2.5 years ago, going on 3 years ago. My wife and I moved where we were before. We were in Leeds, which is kind of a central one of the bigger cities in the north of England, and there was a really good, vibrant tabletop community there, and I was playing with three different groups at once at one point, which was really good. I had two regular games a week for like 6 months to a year, so it was like really in depth. Um, I'm still in contact with a lot of those people, but since moving away, I haven't played in person at all. So it's been all online and remote. And because since I've started making my own games, I've had even less time to and less chance to
Yeah.
play myself.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it's weird. Like the more we make, the less we play somehow, and
yeah,
and I does miss that a lot, and does miss having a regular group that I can play, not online, and seeing people, but it's
hmm
hard. Like mostly I play with my kid or solo or online now, but I think it's really healthy to have like a local community that you can play and engage in and get out of your house. Let's get out of your cave
yeah,
in
absolutely.
in some ways. Colin, uh, if you allow me, can I ask you who is Colin outside of the RPG space? Like who are you uh, outside of the gaming space?
So I think. um, first and foremost, like throughout my life, I've been like a geek or a nerd, whatever you want to call it. So like someone on the outskirts, like liking weird or like unique or unusual things. And so I think outside of role playing games, stuff I like is like films. I went to university for film studies, so that's a big passion of mine as well. Um, uh, Illustration, but that's tied into to role playing games, and photography. I like as well. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think I put a lot of myself, not necessarily into the games that I design, but the games that I run. Like when I'm a GM, they're usually a bit um, fun and unusual, and like someone described it like a comic book, or like kind of um, lots of action, lots of weird moments. Like I do funny voices, stuff like that. So, but I think I'm an introvert, and that doesn't lend itself to being a GM sometimes. But that's when it kind of draws more out of me, and then get a bit more animated and come to life a bit more if I'm like within a crowd of people or a group of people that I know well. So I open myself up a bit more.
Yeah, it's almost kind of a safe space, you know. Like here,
Hmm.
I can be silly. Because I feel like that a lot. I feel like an introvert a lot, and always like in my world, and sometimes in social gatherings, just avoiding saying anything because
Hmm.
sometimes I you know now I realize because of that, that I am autistic, and sometimes I say things that I'm just thinking I shouldn't be saying,
Yeah.
and then develop this kind of don't say much, listen more. Like
Yeah.
I love this saying that says we have 2 ears and one mouth because we're supposed to listen twice as much
Yeah.
as we talk. So I take that to heart. But yeah, in a role playing game environment and table, you know I can let go my freak flag, and I can be weird. I
Hmm.
can let go my imagination, and I can say all those weird things without so much judgment. I think so. That's
Yeah. Exactly.
yeah. I still have the anxiety, the performance and stuff, but it's like a safe space in a way, you
Hmm.
know.
But even
And
like sorry,
go ahead.
even like after I'm run a game or I GM a session, it's fun, it's exciting, but it's also like it takes a lot out of me. Like it drains my social battery, so I have to like just kind of sit and relax and zone out and just like recharge that slowly.
Yeah, and what do you do for recharging? Do you have anything that you do to recharge as energy as you spend, playing games? Do you go to conventions and you run games and you find yourself just, exhausted after that?
Well, so I've done two conventions so far, but I haven't run any games. It's just been like selling at the table. um, just because that's the primary focus. But I'd like to go to some conventions as a like just as a punter, as a guest, rather than as an exhibitor. Gives me a chance to play more games. But I
Yeah.
think yeah, that would so the combination of the crowd of people and the intense like social interaction of playing game, I'd have to like chill out in a dark room and just watch some like mindless YouTube or something like that afterwards.
And what do you usually what do you anything any kind of media you usually watch? Like is like cartoons, anything that relaxes you specifically, or
So, watch a lot of different stuff on YouTube, a lot of like role playing game related stuff. Um, Most of them are 5e just because that's the dominant paradigm. So there's a lot of interesting 5e YouTubers, but also like tech stuff.
do you
Like
recommend anyone? Like
yeah, so there's Bob World Builder is good. He does 5e, but he's starting to move more into Cairn and DCC.
hmm,
Um, he's got a good approach to 5e, and he's made a few videos about OGL, the OGL thing, and Wizards of the Coast, and has been critical of them, but in a way that that isn't
Healthy.
just, yeah, exactly. It isn't like
Yeah,
angry rants and that sort of thing.
yeah,
Um, there's WASD 20, who does 5e stuff as well, and he does mapping. I enjoy watching him. Roll for
yeah.
Initiative, who do Pathfinder 2. They're a husband and wife couple who do different videos, so they hand off between them, and they're really good, really enjoyable.
Cool, cool. You mentioned, liking weird things and unique things,
Hmm.
and being a geek, a nerd, and doing film studies. And do you see any of those aspects of life? And you mentioned how they affect the way you GM, but can you maybe pinpoint any aspect or any elements of your games or the stuff that you made that you can trace back to any of those influence, like film studies, like how do you, because you mentioned the way Gem being a comic book and a lot of
Hmm.
actions, and did your film studies influence anyway how you design your games, how you make them more cinematic anyway, or this
Yeah,
has any influence?
yeah. I think because I started off doing film studies because I wanted to write comic books, and film studies was as close as I could get at the time to like writing comics in for university. So that kind of like having that idea of sequential art, and like film is a sequence of images. So having that kind of approach to cinematic or to visual storytelling helps a lot when GMing, or especially if I'm like writing adventures or designing games. Having an idea of what an encounter looks like in my head and how the players might approach it visually, I think that helps. It helps ground me in like in the room and practicality of looking at things and how things get interacted with and that sort of thing.
Yeah, as you have to set up all these things, for a movie, maybe you you're more used to how to set up in RPGs. And
Hmm.
has any particular teaching or artists or anything that you learned in the film school still resonates with you as you write games, like any particular lesson that you, oh, I remember this and now I'm applying this as I make these games?
I think because what a lot of what I did was analysis of films. It would be closer to something like English literature, like
Mm.
analyzing the themes and the tone, or the themes and the
Oh yeah,
um,
structure and
yeah, exactly, yeah. But also the
yeah,
like the
yeah,
mise en scène, like the structure of the image.
it's a great, yeah, it's perfect for illustrator and game design, and when you know the structure you can take something apart and build it or yourself, and
Hmm.
it's a great way of seeing things. Like a game designer has to have this analytic eye to look at something and take it apart and see how they can, even put that back together, or take different things apart and build something new, like combining
Hmm.
them. Sometimes I do think though that having this analytics eye all the time sometimes pull me away from enjoying something. I'm
Yeah.
watching a movie and and my wife is getting so into it and emotion, and I'm like, yeah, I can steal that and maybe combine with something. And I'm not really experienced that. Like, do you have those sensations sometimes? Like we get too much into, we always like looking for things to pull apart, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was so when I was like at university for film studies, it was the like being able to just watch a film and not analyze it was difficult because my brain was in analysis mode all the time. So I was like picking apart things, like looking at like, oh, this aligns to this kind of theoretical structure, or like this is a feminist approach, or that sort of thing. So it was tough to just switch my brain off and enjoy a film. Um,
Yeah. But
and
it also has a very good part too, like when, because we know people made this and we're like,
Mhm.
wow, that's really good fucking writing. Like
Yeah.
that's really well made. Like instead of just we can appreciate the crafts a little bit more, but sometimes it gets pulled from story and then like the suspense of disbelief. But that's
Mhm.
I get really surprised. I'm like, wow, someone wrote that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Uh,
Yeah.
by the way, as the podcast is about like the weird and weirdness, and you mentioned like
Mhm.
weird and unique things, and I
Mhm.
always ask guests here. So, could you define what is weird for you, and how do you seek it, not only in your work, but life in general and experiences?
Yeah, I think so. Weird for me is anything anything outside of the ordinary, or anything outside of like a day-to-day, like, shared experience, I guess. So, like, growing up for me, I always liked folklore and mythology, especially like urban legends. Um, so finding like just the weird things that may or may not be true, or there's just like a shred of truth to it, or like stuff that exists on the fringes of normal everyday life. Um, so I think that, like, having an approach of that, of like something that just not everyone um, would come across or would think about, like the unusual things.
Yeah, and now that you describe it in this way, like in being this liminal space between what
Hmm.
is ordinary, what is day to day, and what is completely alien,
Hmm.
and how weird can be, not only fascinating and enchanting and interesting, but it can be like completely terrifying in some
Hmm.
ways. I had this visualization of uh this planet that is locked to the rotation of the sun. So half of it is completely, bright. So that's the
Yeah.
normal stuff. That's the
Yeah.
ordinary. And there's this strip of, twilight zone that is between the normal and the completely alien, which is the dark that you can see, you can phantom. That is
Hmm.
still attractive in a way, although it's terrifying. It's
Yeah.
still attractive because it's the unknown. We fear it, but we can't help but wanting to go there. And the wonderful weird, it's right that strip that it dialogues with the normal and with the everyday life, but it also flirts with the unknown and completely alien. And we
Hmm.
we like to see it, but we can't comprehend it totally. It's this middle ground that it's hard to navigate, right? We can go from, but we need both. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. That's a good visual that I created. I'm a kind of
Yeah.
visual thinker sometimes.
Yeah. No, I get it. I think
Do-
having like, for me as well, like, weird is something um that 90 or 95% of people would not engage with, or wouldn't necessarily even see it or come across it in day-to-day life. So um like I've always said, I said that I like grew up a geek and a nerd. Um and it's stuff that, like, so 90 or 95% of people wouldn't engage with, like, the types of films or the types of games that I played. But I guess that's changing nowadays. Like, if you would have told me as 13-year-old kid that the biggest films in the world right now were superhero films, um, and that, like, Dungeons and Dragons was one of the most streamed game, um, like, of all time, or, like, streamed, like,
yeah,
non-video game stuff like that. Like, it would have
and
blown me
and
away.
people go to shows to watch people
Yeah,
playing role playing game. That's
yeah. Like, what?
really, I couldn't imagine this at all.
Hmm.
You mentioned how, like, common or more normal people avoid the weird. Uh, would you try to theorize why, like, why the out of the ordinary scares or keep people away? Even though we all know it's kind of interesting, it's attractive in some way. Or do you think other people simply are attracted to it?
I don't know. I think a lot of people, if they don't recognize something, or if it isn't familiar to them, they'll either ignore it, turn away, or it just doesn't register. Um, Whereas like some people will see something weird or see something unusual and look to it and want to find out more about it. It doesn't there's no wrong or right about that. Like there's no like I'm not saying that people who don't look at weird things are, they're they're not worth talking
No,
about,
no,
stuff like that.
no, not at all. I mean, I just theorize that sometimes the people that are more in connection with themselves, with who they are, and the weird elements that we all have,
Hmm.
can identify more easily with these weird elements that are out there, and see some kind of kinship in a way. And it's easy for us to seek the weird because we can see ourselves as weird too, and we accept that. And
Hmm.
sometimes people that can see themselves as weird, even though I don't know. I like to believe we all have a weirdness inside of us, but
Yeah.
some of us learn how to cultivate it, and some of us learn how to repress it, and we are taught to repress it when we see something that weird. We can't connect with it, so we avoid it or we fear it. We treat it as the weirdness is treated within us, so we avoid it. So I don't know. It's just something I think sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you have any weird ritual for when you start working your creative work, when you go to draw, when you go to write? Do you have any procedure that helps you get into the mood and into the creative space?
So so I've don't so I'm kind of unusual in that I don't listen to like a lot of music. My friend always says that I'm from the Footloose dimension, which is like music and dancing was banned in the film Footloose. Because then he's massively into music, uses it to chill out, and so I like music, like but I won't listen to it, like I won't seek out things to listen to unless I'm drawing. Um, and it's funny, like if I'm writing, then I don't want to listen to music because I want to be able to focus purely on writing. So I'll sometimes listen to like white or brown noise just to kind of distract myself, like just to put myself in a little cocoon of sound, and not get distracted. But if I'm drawing, then I like to listen to stuff because I'm not focusing too much on the lyrics, and it just allows me to kind of chill out. Um, so I'll tend to listen to the same kind of stuff, like 70s classic rock or like Canadian maritime rock. It's almost like
Canadian what?
so it's Canadian maritime rock. So like
Maritime. Uh-huh.
yeah, like so in Canada, there's the maritime provinces, which are the eastern
Oh,
provinces. So Halifax, or sorry, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, um, etc. Prince Edward Island. So they're on the far east coast of Canada, and there's a lot of Irish and Scottish culture that got basically ported over because there are a lot of Irish and Scottish immigrants into Canada. So there's a lot of like sea shanties, and because fishing and the sea is really important to the livelihood. So there's a lot of old sea shanties that were turned into folk rock, and there were like musicians who do like
nice.
folk rock. So yeah, it's like Gordon Lightfoot is one of them. So it's cool. It's just kind of chill, um, and there's a lot of like folk elements to it.
Does it sound like a pirate rock kind of thing or
Yeah, a
no?
little bit.
Yeah,
Like
that's
some maritime rock's been turned into like harder rock, and it does sound like pirate rock. So it's
wow,
cool.
nice. I want to check it out for sure.
Yeah.
And you mentioned white and brown noise for writing. Do you have anything else like besides music? Do you put on shoes? Do you have a set amount of time every day that you work, or like you always pour some coffee, or it's just putting the music or white and brown noise for you to
Yeah,
work?
if I want to, like, if I'm working on like a freelance project and I want to be able to just get it done and like sit down and do it, then I'll put on the brown noise and put I use a timer. It's like similar to the Pomodoro timer, where it's like I'll work for 25 minutes, then take a break for 5 minutes, just so it gives me time to focus and then time to not focus. and like just do whatever I want, like just play on my phone for 5 minutes. So I'll do stuff like
Yeah.
that. I don't have a, I haven't worked out a routine yet of like sitting down and writing. I kind of do it when I can, because
Mm-hmm.
I've got a day job and I've got like I don't
Yeah.
want to I don't want to
I do that too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I got my
I
wife
put
and I
I
don't
put
want to.
I put a goal, like I have to at least sit down and do something today with this or this,
Yeah,
and sometimes day job is really slow and I can open a window and just write a little bit. Sometimes it's
yeah,
very busy and I can't, and then I sometimes write on the subway. Sometimes, when my wife puts the kids to bed, and then I have like half an hour, 45 minutes, and
yeah.
then I sit down and do my best or something like this. So I get it.
Nice.
It's yeah. Do you see any particular space or from your imagination from your life where you see yourself drawing inspiration a lot from? I always say here for me it's the comics, movies, and the pop culture from my childhood, like
Hmm.
cartoons, and but of course that I get from every other place, like stuff that I'm experiencing now. But
Hmm.
that is like the base of the recipe, I would say. Do you have anything like this for yourself?
Yeah, so there's some like some core texts that I've like taken inspiration from, and then there's also some like themes and some kind of more subtextual stuff. So like for Runecairn, that was my version of a Dark Souls tabletop game. So I'm a big Dark Souls fan, like the video game series. So that was like a primary inspiration for me, and it essentially was my adaptation of the game into TTRPG form. Um, but then
Hmm.
like the subtextual inspiration is stuff like folklore and mythology, um, and like especially because I'm in England now, it's the like English folklore I'm not as familiar with. Like I grew up with Greek and Egyptian and Norse mythology, so I'm like learning all these strange and weird little local customs and local myths in the UK. So I try to bring those more into my writing.
And how are you learning this? Are you doing research? Like, do you take books? Do you talk to people? Like, do you visit folkloric places? How are you learning about English myths?
Yeah, so a lot of it's like visiting places that have a lot of history in them, like York, for instance. York played a massive role in like English history and Viking history as well. Like there was a big Viking settlement in York, and so there's a lot of and Roman as well, like going back to Roman Viking. So there's loads of history there, and I've been on a couple of ghost tours in York, and so that you learn a lot of the local
You,
folklore and
you
myth.
said ghost tour?
Yeah, so that basically they run these tours for tourists. So you meet at a certain point at night, and then there's a tour guide who takes you around and shows you all of the haunted spots in the city. And York is
Hmm.
famously haunted, like ghosts going back to Roman times. So it's interesting, like hearing those stories as told like that, like because these are stories that have been passed down and told for like hundreds of years and changed and customized and like warped over time. And
Optimized, yeah.
yeah, exactly, yeah. um but yeah, so doing stuff like hands-on, like learning about folklore, but also like reading about it, and I do a lot of research. Like uh when I wrote Runecairn, I did a lot of research into Norse myths um and like following back how myths relate to each other, like how one myth takes a different form in like in Scotland or Ireland. There could be similar myths to Scandinavia, but they take a different form because of like a different experience. So like the Selkie, for instance, just like a seal person. The myth of the Selkie is different in Scandinavia than it is in like northern Scotland, and they're fairly close, but like the myths itself changes depending on where you go.
Yeah, that it's fascinating. It has a little bit to do with language too. Like we have
Hmm.
this language, like Germanic, same orange, but a little bit distance, and especially in the past that communication wasn't so easy. Like
Hmm.
distance and time is could almost make like a mathematical form to how the language changes, and it's really fascinating. And you mentioned that doing research for your games, and one question that popped in my mind was, what would you say comes first for you? Like, do you when you have ideas for these games, are you just like doing search and research, like stuff that interests you, and then you get an idea for a game, or like, oh, I want to do a game about Vikings, and then I'm gonna do the research about it. What comes first for you? The search, just for the search itself, or and then get an idea, or get the idea and then do the research?
A bit of both, really. Like, I'll have an idea in my head. Like, I had an idea for the Dark Souls game in my head, um, and then when I decided on like like turning that into a TTRPG, then I started looking at specific instances and specific like I wasn't sure, like it didn't start off being a Norse based TTRPG. Like it was just Dark Souls, that was the main skeleton of it. um, but it made sense to fit it within like a Norse mythology framework. So from there, I looked at like what kind of creatures would you come across, what kind of like um, experiences would you have, like what kind of challenges would there be for like living in like a Norse world or like a Viking Age world.
So were you like studying and getting interested in this kind of mythology, like Norse mythology, before you started working on the game, or just afterwards?
Yeah, so there like I always had an interest in Norse mythology, but that was sparked more from writing the game. So I've learned more about Norse mythology in the last 2 or 3 years than I had like in the last 20 or 30 years. So it's, yeah, there's some like
Nice.
initial interest.
And what could you share as like a really weird and wonderful thing that you learned about Norse mythology that you didn't learn before, and uh, could share with us to surprise us a little bit?
So the like digging more into Norse myth, like there's so many different interpretations and versions of it, because the like a lot of it comes from um, Eddas and like epic poems that were written in the 1200s or 1100s or 1200s. But even then, that was like 200 or 300 years removed from when the actual Viking Age was. So
Hmm.
there aren't a lot of isn't a lot of information firsthand that we know about the Viking Age. It's all written 200 or 300 years later, and with a different, like with a Christian lens put on top of it for a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that, and like knowing that a lot of the information's lost because it wasn't written down, or if it was written down or was um, communicated, it's been changed over time. So there's a lot of like there's a lot of combination of figures in Norse mythology. Like we don't know if this person is actually this person, like if Odin is actually Odin in this situation, or if it's someone that was just given, like that someone has just written down as Odin, because they don't know, like they didn't have a better
Mm-hmm.
person to identify
Better
as.
source, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's there's some really cool like myths, like just
Yeah,
weird
it's
stuff like.
now that you thought about it, it's kind of the OSR, right? Like a
Yeah,
reinterpretation of what's really happened. So it's how we imagine or how we idealize how those things were, right? So not necessarily how they were themselves. So
exactly. Yeah.
it's some correlation there. Colin, do you have any artists or creators, whether they are from the RPG world or from other media, other art, music, and anything that inspires the way you approach your work, the way you position yourself in the scene, or how do you approach the process of making your art?
Yeah, so I think a big influence on me growing up, like in my teen years and early 20s, was a British comic writer named Warren Ellis. And I so I
How? Sorry,
uh,
what's his
uh,
name?
Warren Ellis.
Warren. Ah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Or,
So there's an Australian musician named Warren Ellis, but there's also a British comic writer. So there was in the late 90s, early 2000s, there were a group of British and Irish writers who were super influential. Warren Ellis was one of them. And he's got a really interesting approach to research and to writing, and his books and comics are always filled with really unusual, interesting things, and it makes you think about things in a kind of a new way. Like he's always got a unique spin on things. And so for like, I try to I try to be a writer like he is. Um, and then when it comes to like creators in the TTRPG space, there's a lot of people I take inspiration from, and a lot of people I look up to. Like you, for instance, you're a big inspiration. I
oh,
think,
thanks.
yeah, I think you
Yeah.
do really cool stuff, and the way you approach things, the way you're a writer and an illustrator, and um, I think that's really good. I think there's a lot of um, like Zedek or Zedek Siu as well.
Hmm.
Is a is an amazing writer. He's actually writing an adventure for me for We Deal in Lead. So
Nice.
I'm yeah really excited um, to get my hands on that. But
Fantastic.
there's so many like inspirational indie TTRPG like designers and creators. It's such a great group of people. Um, yeah, I think I could
It's hard to pinpoint. Like
yeah,
I
exactly.
know I ask in to be honest, I'm usually looking for you know creators outside of the hobby because
Hmm.
it's always nice to hear if I inspired someone or if like another creator inspired you. And it's always fantastic, and I like that because it kind of pollinates and show people the diverse things, and we all learn from each other a lot. Like
Hmm.
I every game I make is inspired by the games I'm reading and writing by other authors because my hyper focus is role playing games, and I buy all this sort of games and I read them, and they're really influential. I learn from like everybody, uh, but I always seek these inspirations from outside of the hobby because it's
Hmm.
something different. Like each one of us will carry something. Like for you, it's like a British com writer. For me, sometimes it is stand-up comedians influence the
Yeah,
way I make games, and I think that's so rich. And someone will say a musician, and it's great how we can learn about role-playing games through anything. And that phrase that always reminded me is like from one thing on a thousand things. So it's hard to name people from the hobby because it's almost everyone
yeah,
in some ways. Yeah.
yeah.
Courtney, are you work on anything new or something that's coming out soon that would you like to talk about it and share some of the your favorite weird parts of the work that you are working on right now?
Sure. Yeah. So I've got I've been working on a remastered version of Runecairn,
Mm.
specifically Runecairn Warden Saga. So it was a collection of three zines that I put out last year. So I put it out in conjunction with Exalted Funeral. Like they printed the book, but it was my kind of it was like a co-publication with them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm doing a remastered version, with a brand new cover. With I went through and redid all the layout, and
Wow.
I took the so I used public domain images in the original, and so I went back and um, like really like, kind of photo bashed them a little bit, or added a bit more texture and depth and color to them. So
Mm-hmm.
the images themselves are remastered as well. Um, and so that's coming to Kickstarter on the 23rd of January. So I'm really excited for that. This is going to be my first Kickstarter like in 3 years.
How
I
are you?
did.
It's exciting and it's exciting and anxiety too. It's
It
both.
is, yeah, yeah, because like yeah, because there's the Kickstarter is a big stage, so it's putting yourself up on a big stage. I've done crowdfunding on Itch before, um, and so that went really well. But it's not nearly as big a stage as Kickstarter. Like you get people from all over the
Yeah.
world who will back a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Um, so
I'm
yeah, and
thinking
it's
of
bit.
doing something for like Zenmonth on each because I
Oh,
can't
nice.
use Kickstarter here. Yeah, I have something for Primal Quest and I never tried, so I'll try this. But yeah, Kickstarter is great, and a lot of people will see it, and because it's so big, I think the anxiety is bigger. Like you don't know
Yeah,
what to expect,
yeah.
and yeah, I
Like
remember
the
like doing this with Gala Night Games. I partnered with them,
mhm.
and we had a couple of Kickstarters, and it drives me to a level excited that it's hard to concentrate on anything else and like in the first days,
Yeah,
and I hate it, and because I see that I'm not here for being present with my family. I try to be, but I'm always checking the phone, and yeah, wow.
yeah.
I wish you all the very best, and I'm obviously gonna back this, and
Oh, thanks.
Runecairn is a great game, and you're doing a great job, and hearing about how this always gonna be remastered and even better, it's great. So congratulations for this. So, but what would you say is like your weirdest favorite part of this new edition of Runecairn?
I think seeing because it's based on, or like the mechanics are inspired by Dark Souls, it's seeing what people make of it and seeing the weird combinations that could happen, because there's like four standard backgrounds, so that determines what you start off with, like the equipment that you start off with. But then you could get other equipment, and there's each like things have different special abilities and special attacks. So seeing what people try to do to break the game, essentially, I think is going to be really interesting. See, like, oh, I'm gonna have this massive two-handed sword, and I'm gonna use magic at the same time, and see what happens. Or like an axe, and like I'm gonna be sneaky. Just see how people try and break the game, and seeing what kind of worlds and like experiences people build from it, because I've kept the world building pretty high level and pretty hands off. So there's just hints to like the weird things that exist in the world. So seeing what people do with that, I think is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, it's always great to make something and see how people can get this and make uh something different and be part of. It's like a collaboration, like we're collaborating with
Hmm.
all these people, and you don't have really to do much about it, and it's always there, always unique,
Hmm.
and you feel part of something greater than yourself. So yeah, it's,
Absolutely.
it's fantastic. And Colin, can you identify any particular mark, like some would say like your voice in your games? Can you say like you have a weird mark that you leave in the work that you do?
So I tend to um, like I like to work mimics into things. So like the mimic creature. That's kind of
Mm-hmm.
my hallmark. Like especially if I'm running a game, like when I was DMing and GMing for my friends, I'd always have a hidden mimic somewhere. and it would be like an unusual situation. Like one time it was a there was a child, like the adventurers come across this child trying to pull a sword out of a stone in a room, um, and he's like struggling with it, and they don't know what's going on. Like, why is this kid in this dungeon? So he's trying to pull a sword out, and if they go to help him, then the whole sword, the child, and the stone is a mimic, and it's just disguised itself as this
Wow,
tableau.
the child
Yeah,
too.
yeah. So just like I, I like having hidden identities. I think is I put into my games. So like it could be a god disguised in a human form, or like a creature that's disguised itself in a different form. So like um, just to bring a bit of mystery, and the idea that like that magic and like old magic and old gods are there's essences and traces everywhere, so you never know what's what's fully real. Like the idea of in folklore of like an old wizened old woman who, if you don't help her, then she'll put a curse on you, or if you do help her, then she'll reveal herself to be like a goddess, and she'll tell you where your true love is, and that sort of thing. So just yeah.
Yeah. Do you think there is any, subconscious reason for this? Like some way, some kind of lesson, like don't judge a book by its cover or something like this. Like always, hold your judgments and experiments to see what things are really all about. Do you think there's something like this? And do you see this in your life? And like, does this experience resonate with stuff that you lived through, and now you somehow feel this impulse to put this in the work that you do?
Yeah, I think like I always hope that people have the best intention at heart, and I always like to think that a good deed is its own reward, and the good you put into the world will be given back to you, that sort of thing. So that's I think that kind of manifests in my writing sometimes. Like um, you never know who um,
Who's on the other
yeah,
side, right?
yeah, exactly. You never know what someone's thinking, or you never know like who someone might really be on the inside. So you should just treat everyone well, I guess. It's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just wondering, and maybe
Yeah.
that's how it manifests. I mean, sometimes it's not even conscious, and like we make stuff of, yeah, maybe this is because of that. I don't know. Hello, weirdos. This is Diogo Nogueira, and I'm back with a word from our sponsors. Me. I just released a new game called Cosmosaurus, in which you play a dinosaur space ranger who protects the galaxy from evil threats such as slime bankers, undead pirates, and Cosmosaurus from a void dimension. It's a game with a runes light system inspired by Forged in the Dark and Lasers and Feelings. It comes with a bunch of tables for you to generate content for it. If you know my games, they're really easy to play and they have tools to help you improvise and play with low prep. It's an ideal game for one-shots, short campaigns, and introducing new people to the hobby, and it's a really perfect family game. I play with my kids all the time. It's a game inspired by Saturday morning cartoons. It's really well illustrated by Lucas Kowalski from Poland, and with a great layout by Guilherme Gontijo. It's a really fun game. You should check it out on DriveThruRPG, itch.io, or exclusively in print on exaltedfuneral.com. I have many other games there, check them out. All the links are in the show notes, so click there. And let's get back to Weird with our chat. Colin, do you have any maybe a dream project, something you really want to make, but you don't feel quite there yet, like you're biding your time and maybe one day tackle this big thing? And if you do, uh, would would you like to share with us like some of this grand vision that you might have?
I don't know, like, 'cause I always had 2 role-playing games, or, like, 2 big projects in the back of my head. when I started doing like making stuff for role playing. Like I started off doing 5e stuff. So I always had two ideas in the back of my head. One of them was for a Dark Souls role playing game, and one of them was for a Dark Tower role playing game. And the Dark Tower game manifested itself in as We Deal in Lead. Um, so I've expunged those two like main massive projects like out of my head and into reality. Um, there is, yeah, there's kind of things bubbling away. I've got some ideas for like, I actually had a novel in the back of my head. Like I've been planning on writing a novel for 30 years now. Um, so that might manifest itself in like in role playing form, or I might actually just write the novel. So yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see.
And would you share like what is the novel about, or like have you written anything for it? Like have you started writing it, or do you have notes or?
Yeah, so probably 10 or 12 years, 10 or 12 years ago, I wrote maybe about 30,000 words for it. um, it would have to be like I'd have to rewrite it, everything from scratch just because of
Oh
like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we
uh,
change a lot. Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
yeah, absolutely. But so it's the idea is the main concept is one of like Viking werewolves essentially, or Norse werewolves. um,
Mm-hmm.
the idea started, sorry, my cat's climbing around the desk. It started after I watched the film Underworld, about the vampires fighting the werewolves. That was
Mm-hmm.
early 2000s. So I I came away from that thinking, you know, we always see if there's vampires and werewolves in the same situation, like essentially fighting each other, it's always the vampire that's the dominant force, and the werewolf is seen as the like more bestial, kind of subservient, or like more wild or untamed force. So I thought, what would happen if you inverted that and have the werewolves be like essentially like um, not high class, but like a more dominant um, species or a more dominant faction, and the vampires be like scrabbling around, like more bestial, um, more like
Mm-hmm.
um, kind of like the vampires in Blade 2, if you're familiar with that. They're like
Yeah,
the
more
mouths that are,
feral kind of. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So not as intelligent, and not uh,
yeah.
as cultured.
And the way like we're describing this can very well be, like a setting for Runecairn, as you like
Exactly.
too,
Yeah.
right? You can connect to that pretty well.
Yeah.
That's great. Uh, what did you say would be like one of the weirdest game you ever played, or something that made an impression for you, and saw like, yeah, well, games can do pretty weird stuff, and something that's made an impact on you.
I think so. I've played a lot of like traditional games.
and
A lot
and
of,
it can be video games,
yeah.
RPGs,
Oh
and
yeah.
tape, and yeah, yeah.
I think the weirdest video game I ever played was a game called Seaman for Dreamcast. Um, it was it was a game that came with a microphone. So you plug
Hmm.
the microphone into your Dreamcast controller, and it was basically, you started off with a tadpole and you spoke to the tadpole and you would teach it words, and it would grow
Hmm.
and learn and like evolve, as you have to like take care of it like a Tamagotchi. Um, so it was just, that was really strange. Just
Hmm.
speaking to to this fictional video game character
Yeah,
through a
I never saw
microphone.
one you could speak to, like Tamagotchi,
Yeah,
all these games that you control, kind of. Yeah, I never saw this kind of interaction. Nice.
yeah. I think for role playing games, um, yeah, I think so. All the games I've played have been like traditional fantasy or cyberpunk or um, some kind of variation of that. But one game that I played and that was really really interesting, and it took on a meta level because I was in a long term game of Pathfinder, um, and so the GM of that game also ran a science fiction game that was similar to like Starfinder or Traveler, so like
Mm-hmm.
a sci-fi space based game. Um, and it turned out that as we were playing it, that the sci-fi game fed directly into the fantasy game that we were playing. Like that, the fantasy world that we were on turned out to be like a planet, an alien planet in the same universe as the sci-fi game. And so what we did in the sci-fi game had a direct impact on the fantasy game. So it was really cool, like seeing like the threads
Nice.
between the two
Yeah,
games. Yeah,
that's
really
fantastic.
nice. Yeah,
Uh,
nice bit of GMing.
yeah, I kind of imagine my games like in the same universe, especially the first one, like Sharp Swords and Dark Streets and Solar
Hmm.
Blades, and and I do play with the notion that's in Primal Quest, like uh, time is cyclical, so the future is the past and the past is the
Yeah,
future. So I can have a sci-fi game with the same system that is the future of Primal Quest, but it's also the past. So stuff can get. Uh, I like this connectivity, and I love. I use it to love in the OSR, like we have these adventures and settings that you would refer to places and dungeons from other
hmm,
authors of the indie space. So I it's a cool way to connect people. There are people and works that are connected outside of the game, in the game too, and connects people in some way and leads
yeah,
the people that are playing to check out this other great work. Yeah. Do you have any other hobbies, besides role playing games? Anything that you do that's basically just for yourself and it's not like, aimed to maybe be consumed by others, if you know what I mean?
yeah. One thing that I've recently got back into is wrestling, like watching wrestling. Um, so I grew up watching like WWF in the '80s. And then again, kind of a similar situation. I fell off, like didn't just lost interest in it, and then I started working at a cinema in Canada, and everyone there was a big wrestling fan.
Hmm.
So I started watching wrestling again and watching the pay per views and that sort of thing. And in the last 6 months, I've started getting back into it and watching WWE, what's called WWE now, and it's just like it's really interesting because it's a I think the thing that interests me is that it's an unending, ongoing story, um, where there's every week there's a new episode and new things happen and like characters rotate in and out and like people who are bad guys this year are good guys next year, and it's always like there's a consistent storyline.
Yeah,
It's similar to like comics where you've got
yeah,
60 to 80 years of continuity, and like it's a continuous thread unless they decide to reboot things and remake like the world in different ways. So I think yeah, it's I mean that's something that I just watch for fun and
yeah.
yeah.
It is kind of like a goofy, violent, and whimsical soap opera in a way, like
Exactly,
that
yeah.
just keeps going. And I confess I don't watch much, wrestling. We don't
Hmm.
have this tradition here in Brazil, not even like lucha libre or anything like this.
Hmm.
But I did love a show on Netflix called Glow, which is
Oh
like
yeah,
glorious ladies of wrestling,
yeah, it was great.
and
I love that show.
yeah, it's a shame it ended because it was a really good one. Uh,
Yeah.
but I got interested in learning a little bit more about the world and and I think it's useful because, as you said, it's a narrative. So and it's entertainment and it is kind of a game. So
Hmm.
I think there might be a lot for RPG designers to draw from that and see how they build this unending story. So it's a campaign in some way.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that can be. Have you noticed anything you took from wrestling in any of your games or any adventure that you run? Did you draw, maybe NPCs like villains? Can you draw from these wrestlers or anything?
So I haven't yet, but I can definitely see it starting to like seep into like my subconscious.
Yeah,
Just yeah, there's a, because like I think look like building an NPC. If you want to know how to build an NPC, look at like a wrestler, because you need to be able to
yeah,
put across like instantly what their vibe is. Basically, are they a bad guy? Like, or do you want the players to like hate this NPC? Then just look at wrestling and see what they do, what the kind of things that they do, and how the crowd reacts to them, and that sort of thing. And like just having like a capsule of a characteristic, um, and being able to pick that out.
yeah.
I think yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah, good lesson for sure. And I remember some of them. Like I remember really, from the '90s, like the Undertaker and
Yeah,
this because we have video games. So I remember
yeah.
like the claws and stuff, and it's and they are really iconic. So even if you get inspired by doing illustrations, you can probably draw something from there too. I think.
Hmm,
And
absolutely.
Colin, now like we're getting in the middle of the episode, and I want to shift more, personal questions about the experiences you have and might have had. So, have you ever had any contact with? You mentioned like going to this place like ghost tours. Have you ever had
Hmm.
any contact with the supernatural in any way? Whether they are like ghosts or like monsters or anything like this.
So I was thinking back, like in preparation for the interview, and I was thinking back and like, have I ever experienced anything like truly weird or truly unexplainable? And I think when I was a kid, um, it was like I was at a sleepover at my friend's place, and there were probably three or four of us. We're about maybe 12 years old, I think, 12 or 13. Um,
hmm
and it's that heightened uh atmosphere of like a lot of sugar, like watching horror films and like staying up too late. And it was like windy, like it was like in so my friend lived in in a trailer in the middle of nowhere, so there's like wind
Mm,
blowing and like it was cold, like the dead of winter. And so we'd gotten into such a heightened state that we were convinced that there was a face peering out at us, or peering into the house from outside in the middle of the night. Um, Whether or not that was
how-
like just group consciousness or like a group experience, but we're all convinced that we saw this face staring at us. So that's like,
wow.
I think I think I've become more cynical and um, uh, more of a skeptic.
Yeah, or your mind is only defending your reality,
Yeah,
so you don't
this is
you
true.
don't
Yeah,
freak out. So yeah. So,
I think
but
I think the
how
curve.
was the face
So,
like? Yeah, how was
so
the
it
face, and
was
what did you feel? What did you think about it? Is
so it was like I remember us being like terrified in a funny way, like
was it
hysterically
a
terrified.
person, a
Yeah,
monster?
it was like um I can't remember what I actually experienced, or what my mind
Oh
has
yeah, no,
related.
what you
Yeah.
have what you imagine it is now, of course. Like
Yeah.
our memories from our childhood are
Yeah.
completely distorted from our own perceptions and beliefs. But like even if it's not real, it's real for you in a way. So
Yeah.
what do you
I
remember
think
from this, and like what was
so
that?
it was just like a human, like it must have been like a horrific human face staring through the window, and because it was all black, like it was just pitch black outside and bright inside, so you couldn't see anything out there, and then it was just like this face. That's all I remember is the face of it.
Yeah.
So and we were all
Would you think
convinced.
it? Yeah. Would you think it was, any kind of neighbor just trying to scare 12-year-old kids that are just making too much noise late at night or anything
Well, it
like
could
this?
be, yeah. Could be like could have been my friend's dad, like playing a joke
Yeah.
on us, like going around and peering through the window. But it was if it was a neighbor, it was in the middle of nowhere. So
Wow.
so they would have had to travel a long way. Um, but yeah, so I think that like that was the closest I could say. Um, I haven't really, yeah, I haven't because yeah, I think because
Reflected much. Yeah. Yeah. Of
yeah,
course.
and the like my skepticism has like gone like as a curve like this where it's like started off pretty low,
hmm
then when I was a teenager and like it's gotten a bit higher, but now it's kind of now I'm starting to like think that maybe there are other things out there that we don't know about yet, and maybe there's more in the world, like more supernatural stuff in the world. So like as
Yeah.
I've gotten
Yeah.
older, I think who knows what's out there.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of maybe not necessarily believing in the supernatural, but believing more in the experiences. So it doesn't matter if it wasn't a ghost. Like for you in that moment, it was, and the sensation and the things that you feel or think in that time uh,
Hmm.
are real, even if it's not right. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
but you mentioned about how you became more and more cynical and more, maybe pragmatic and do you, can you tell us a little bit about your story in belief like uh what would you believe when you were like younger and how you somehow learned to let those things aside or being more cynical and more a disbeliever and what are making you start question this again and start seeing weird things in a different light and being able to admit that yeah, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe the answers are not available to us right now.
I think like when I was younger, my family lived on a military base, and so at a certain point, my dad left the military, and we were going to move to a new town or a new location. Yeah, to a new town, and I desperately wanted to still be able to go to school with my friends because I would had to go to a new school and like meet all new people and make new friends. So back then, uh, I like we used to go to church fairly regularly, but I prayed that I would be able to go to school with my friends again, like still stay in the same school, and nothing like that didn't happen. So after that, that was like kind of a moment for me where I was like, oh well, why bother? Like why bother believing um, if nothing's going to happen? So I think like in retrospect, like that's supremely selfish behavior. Like oh no, like
Wow. Yeah.
if there's a greater being, then it's going to listen to me and say, oh no, yeah, you can do that. Go ahead. Um, but I think that was like at that point, I'm like, well, maybe there isn't someone out there watching us and listening to our prayers and that sort of thing.
And did you talk to your parents about this? Did you talk to anyone, or you just kept to yourself
Well, I
and
knew
did what
that
was?
yeah, I think I knew that it wasn't like maybe I tried to convince myself that that prayer would work. But I know I didn't. Well, I must have talked to my parents and said, "Oh, I don't want to go. Like I want to stay at the school and go to the school, the same school that my friends are going to."
No, I meant like, did you talk to them about how you then became, a disbeliever? How you, well, now I don't believe in all this because as a kid, like did you brought this like this concerns how you became, disenchanted with religion, spirituality when that happened? Did you talk to them about this or no?
No, I think I just stopped
Yeah.
going to church as often and just stopped kind of engaging with it. you know what, like I must have been 10 or so, 10 or 11. So at a certain
Yeah,
point, it's just like, um,
yeah. And
don't want to engage.
nowadays, you said you're regaining it. Do you feel yourself as a spiritual person, even though it's kind of skeptical in some ways? Or if you don't, do you have any anything that helps you guide through the difficult moments in your life and struggles? Anything that serves you as like a moral that taught your morals, taught your values, and helps you navigate this mess that is life?
So yeah, I think it must have been in the last few years I've kind of started to open myself up a bit more and like be like try not to be as cynical and try to engage more just with people in general and with society. Because for a long time I was just like closed off, like didn't really want to engage. Um, but I
What
think
would that look like? What does that look like being closed off?
like not going out, like staying inside all the time, and not really making an effort to go visit friends or contact them. And
Mm,
um, I think yeah, because my family moved around so much, it was tough to maintain long friendships, just
mm-hmm.
because yeah, we'd go to a new town and I'd have to make all new friends and lose contact with the old friends and that sort of thing. So over the last few years, since I've become a bit more stable, like moving around, like I've so that's kind of helped to regain and retain friendships. And my wife helps a lot. She helps get me out and get me like engaging with people and meeting
Yeah,
people.
yeah. It's kind of this too here. Like, yeah, you have to, yeah, go see your friends. You need to go, and I do, and I
Yeah,
do, but I got caught up in doing in my books, in my games, and then doing
yeah,
the podcast, and and just living in my cave. But we do have to go outside for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, how important is your partner in all the stuff that you like in your creative work, and I can't stress enough how I owe so much to to my partner, my wife Raquel,
Hmm.
and she helps me, and she's a really good partner, and I do my best to do right for her. But how would you say, how does your partner helps you in your work in some way, like being who
So
you are?
yeah, I think she's incredibly important, and I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now without her, because she spurs me on. She gives me support. She's like, yeah, we can do this. She's also like helping out practically now too. Like we went to tabled at a convention for the first time last year in November, and she came along. She helped me. She sat at the table, and she helped like sell the books. And now she's doing more stuff like packing stuff up for me, and she's going to get more involved in like the business side of things to give me
No.
a more of a chance to do like the creative side. So yeah, I wouldn't be able to do it without her, and
Yeah.
she's like super important.
Do you feel like she believes in herself more than you believe in yourself sometimes?
I think so. Yeah, I mean she's absolutely my biggest fan. Um,
Yeah.
and funnily enough, she was the person who bought the first copy of my PDF, or the first PDF on Drive Through RPG.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so she kind of sneakily went off and created an account and bought it. And so I was like, oh, I got a
That's
sale, I
a
got a
yeah.
sale.
That's a great gesture for sure. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Colin, talking about maybe other weird experiences. How do you do with dreams and lucid dreaming, or maybe meditation, hypnosis? Have you ever had out of body experiences or any kind of near death experience that lets you see yourself from a different angle in any way?
So um, I do like experience lucid dreaming, where like um, I think it manifested itself a lot when I used to work retail. And so I'd
Wow.
have a dream about working in a shop, and uh, dealing with like an irate customer or an upset or annoying customer, and then I'd realize that I was dreaming, and so I would just say, no, I don't have to help you, I don't have to do anything, so I can just walk away. So I've experienced that a few times.
Wow.
Like, yeah, so I realize that I'm in a dream, and so I just either I don't worry about it or I shift the focus of the dream to something else. Um, so that yeah, it's happened maybe a dozen times over the last couple of years or last few years. So it's always fun when that happens. But like, oh yeah, I had this nightmare, and then I decided, no, it's not going to be a nightmare. I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm gonna turn it into something else. Um,
Yeah. I remember like very few times I was lucid during a dream, and I could kind of control it. Like, yeah, I'm gonna open a door in this wall, and wow,
yeah,
man, there's a door there, and you could, it's kind of it's cool. It's you feel kind of a super powerful being, like a
yeah,
god in your own domain, and I am fascinated how some people say they can induce lucid dreaming for themselves. There's techniques, and you can do that. I'm always curious. Cesar Capacli, one of the guests that came here, is a Brazilian game designer too. He has a game about that, like Orinautus. It's kind of a cosmonaut, but it's in dreams, and it kind of
cool, yeah,
teaches you how to do that. And I haven't sit down to do that yet. Uh, some I don't know why, but I'm afraid of not doing it well and end up in a
yeah,
nightmare. But yeah, I want to try it someday.
cool, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think um, for a while, like I would have a nightmare or what someone else might consider a nightmare, like because I'm a big fan of zombie films, and so I would have like
Hmm.
a zombie dream where like zombies were coming after me, and I would describe it, and my wife would be like, "Oh, that sounds terrible, terrible. That sounds terrifying." I'm like, "Oh, it was all right. It was cool."
It was
Um,
cool. Yeah.
yeah,
It's inspiration. Like nightmares are awesome because we can
exactly.
steal
Yeah,
all that and make RPG stuff. So
exactly.
yeah,
But
yeah. My kid has nightmares and he hates them. But yeah,
yeah,
I uh,
if you can turn a negative into a positive with a nightmare, then
yeah.
great. Yeah,
And he has managed to become lucid during some of the more recent nightmares, and he's starting to play with it. So not so
nice.
bad. And he's getting used to it in some way. Colin, do have you ever had experience with states of altered awareness, be it through music, meditation, or even use of psychedelics or anything like this? And if you did, uh, have you ever any experience that helped you see maybe reality in a different way, and have ideas to solve problems that you were having?
So I've tried meditation at some point, like when I was younger. I think in my teens, um, and I found it interesting. Like I found it valuable. That's over my cat's tail. Um, but I stopped doing it. I'm not sure why. I think I got for a while. I was like interested,
It
and
happens.
yeah, I was
It's a
reading about
habit.
like
Yeah, it's yeah.
yeah, I was reading about Zen Buddhism, and so I tried to like I got a book about Zen Buddhism, um, and I tried to like induce a Zen state and that sort of thing, because there was a time in the '90s where I was a big fan or like big into Japan and Japanese culture, um, stemming from the Ninja Turtles. Funnily enough, um, so yeah, I got in. I was looking at all different aspects of Japan and got into Zen Buddhism a little bit. But
And did you
yeah,
feel anything, during that period of practicing meditation? Did you think that helped you in any way? Did you brought anything good to you?
yeah, I think it helped calm me down. Like in situations where I needed like to kind of zone out and relax and calm down. Um, I think uh, what helped me few like maybe 10 years ago going through some like tough times at work and like experiencing stress and depression. That's when I was off work for a few weeks and I was playing a lot of Minecraft, and that helped me like relax, and it helped me chill out and like kind of get in a nice state. And like I still play Minecraft sometimes just to zone out and like to relax, because it is like it's building stuff, and it's you can turn off enemies if you want and just have it be non-confrontational and just a nice relaxing experience.
Yeah, that's usually what my son does, and I'm always wanting to play survival for some reason. Uh, yeah. Have you we talked about ghosts and other supernatural things, but I haven't asked you, about UFOs and aliens, and I always do this. So, uh, do you believe in this, like alien life and or UFOs, and do you think they have been here or not? What is your relationship with UFOs and aliens?
I think um, I think the universe is too big for there not to be something out there. Whether or not that exists in what we think, what we perceive as like physical life, I'm not sure. I don't know if they've ever visited, if we've ever been visited by aliens. Um, I I know a lot of people believe we have, and yeah, possibly. Like I do think there's something out there, but it probably doesn't exist in any form that we'd recognize as life potentially.
Yeah, I sometimes I feel we're very egocentric as a species to
Hmm.
always have the weird and the things that we don't understand that is completely outside of our reality, and
Yeah,
they always shape it like humans. They always
yeah,
have a head, two legs, arms, two
yeah,
eyes. They are always very similar to us, like God. Like it's said that God created us in His image, but it's completely the opposite. Like we created Him in this,
yeah,
like he gets angry, he does all the bad stuff that we do. He does it the same way, but he's a perfect being, and quite doesn't make sense. And aliens is the same. And oh, there is this very advanced life form and has surpassed, the difficulties within their own planets. They have united, they have evolved, and yeah, they just look exactly like us, with their heads a little bit bigger. They are gray and they don't have hair, but otherwise,
yeah.
it's us.
And they
So
like to
yeah.
visit us and abduct cows and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
yeah,
and put probes on homes that were
yeah,
supposed to. Yeah, that's a very human thing to do too. That's very, we're
yeah,
obsessed with homes for some reason.
yeah,
uh, Colin, now more like whimsical and playful questions to get to know a little bit better. And I always
hmm.
like to ask if you could choose any superpower to have, from comics, from superheroes, or anything you can imagine, what would you choose to have as a superpower, and what would be the first thing you would do with it?
I think as someone who's like been a lifelong comic fan and superhero fan and stuff, um, I think there's a lot of different ways to answer it. Like, there's the selfish
Yeah.
thing, which would be like, oh, I wish I had telepathy so I could read people's thoughts and like use that to make a lot of money, or be like a great success. Or you could, I could wish for super strength and like you know become like a superhero for the world and that sort of thing. Or yeah, I mean, I think it would, the answer would probably depend on the day that they ask me, like what.
Yeah.
Well, one thing would be really useful or cool would be to either fly or teleport, so that way I could visit my family back in Canada a lot more often, or bring them over here.
Oh yeah. And you left everybody there. Everybody like from family, it's still in Canada. You're like the only one in England.
Yeah.
UK.
So
Wow.
my wife is English, so we have her family over here. So that's been really nice.
Yeah, it's really hard to resist the accents. I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, so everyone's back in Canada. I've got um, so I've got family in Malaysia as well. My dad,
Oh wow.
yeah, my stepmom is Malaysian, so they're going to be going over in January, actually, or at the end of the month.
Yeah,
Um,
that's must be hard to schedule the holidays and all that stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
W-
Um, so yeah, but
Have you ever
um,
went to Malaysia, to visit family or?
no, so they've the last time they were over there was just before COVID happened, or just before quarantine happened.
Hmm.
So they got out just before the country quarantined fully. So this is the first chance going back. I haven't been there yet. My sister was able to go over before, but hopefully when they're there, we'll get a chance to go over and visit because Malaysia sounds amazing and yeah, great
Yeah.
food.
And what would be like the first thing you would do with the superpower? Like you have to fly. Where would you go first?
Probably I'd fly back to Canada just
Yeah.
to pop in and surprise the family.
Yeah. How long have you been since the last time you went there?
So it was 20, was it 22? Yeah, 2022.
Wow.
So we're going back, yeah, we're going back the end of this year. We're going back for Christmas, 24.
Awesome.
So yeah, so it's going to be
It's
really
been
good.
a while, yeah.
Yeah.
And now, if you could pick any weird, fantastical, supernatural thing from fiction, be it role playing games, movies, comics, etc., you probably know the question already. And if you would make it real in our
Yeah.
in our world, what would you choose and why?
I think again, that's like a massive, like choosing out of a massive world of
Yeah.
possibilities is difficult. Um,
Oh,
I
there
don't
is no
know.
consequence. Like there is no
Yeah.
wrong answer. So
Yeah.
like the
There's no,
first
yeah.
thing, it's uh,
I think being able to like travel to different planes would be really cool, like really interesting. Like or different realms, like somewhere that's totally like a fey realm or like an elemental plane or that sort of thing, or like the afterworld. I think that'd be really cool to be able to travel between different realms of reality.
and where would you want to go? Like what would you want to see, especially? Like do you like a different dimension where things are different, or just like an elemental plane and afterward? Uh, what would be like your favorite place in this completely weird universe that you can visit?
I think it'd be cool to visit like a high fantasy style world, like um rather than going back in time and in our own world, like go into um like the fictional world of Lord of the Rings or something like that. I think that would be really cool. Have a not necessarily that exact world, but like having a realm like that. Um, uh, I'm a sucker for like high fantasy or classic fantasy.
Do you
So
do you have a favorite, fictional world? Anything like this, like a favorite setting, or
I
do you
think
have it?
I think the world of the Dark Tower is really interesting. Um, like the Stephen King's The Dark Tower.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a really like dystopic world, um, but it's like in the far future of ours. But also, it's similar to how you describe Primal Quest, where it's all times kind of melded together. So there's like
Yeah.
far past, far future. So I think that would be
Mm.
really cool,
I
but
gotta check
also
out this
super
more. I remember reading comics for it a long
cool.
time
Yeah.
ago, but yeah, I have to revisit for sure.
Yeah, it's a really cool idea or like cool setting, but very dangerous and grim.
Yeah. Finally, if you do you remember the last time you felt really happy and grateful for being here and being alive? And if you do, Would you share with us what was this moment, and how that made you feel this way?
I think like so I spent my first Christmas Day with my wife's family just this past Christmas. Um and so we got to I got to experience Christmas Day like with their family, how they used to experience it, and like go to the pub on Christmas morning, like just as the Christmas dinner is being made, and um, so that was really nice. Like felt like being home again and being part of a family. So that was made me feel really happy and content.
Yeah, it's great being felt like we are welcome when you're part of a group and people are loving, and because
Absolutely.
Christmas can be quite confrontational sometimes too. So
Yeah.
it's awesome to have the opportunity to be connected with people. We're all in the same page in some ways, and being loving. So great. Congratulations for you and for this moment. And
Yeah.
thank
Thank
you
you.
for sharing with us. It's this small moments. And it's kind of a cool tradition. I'm going on a pub on a Christmas
Yeah.
morning.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
very, very, very British thing to do, like the
Yeah.
pubs. And yeah.
Yeah. It was an experience, like
Yeah.
because it was a local pub, so only 5 minutes away, like 5 minute walk from their house. So there were a lot of like characters, like local characters, like so really interesting people. So it was an interesting experience. It was good.
Yeah. And was there a lot of people on the pub on Christmas? Is this something
It was
normal that
busy,
like
yeah,
every? Okay, yeah.
yeah. There used to be
I
two pubs in the town, so one closed, so everyone's going to this pub now. So yeah,
yeah.
and they're only open for
I
like 2 or 3 hours.
mm, I remember British comedians and comedians from the UK. They always joke how they drink so much more in the UK than
Yeah,
in America. Like it's they joke, wow, you drink 2 glasses of wine and you can't drive. Wow, I drink 2 pints of beer as breakfast or something like this, and it's it's
yeah,
really strange. Yeah, the culture of the pub is so strong, and like kids
yeah.
go to the pub like with their parents, and
Yeah, because
yeah,
it's like it's a family, like it's seen as a family thing
yeah.
or like part of family time to go to the pub and like have a Sunday lunch, like have a roast dinner on a Sunday afternoon in the pub.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's part of the like British culture, absolutely.
And Colin, finally, thank you so much for coming here. I had a great time. I learned so much. We had
Yeah, it was
some
really good.
good ideas and some phrases. And before you go, do you want to share anything like with your readers out there? How would you find you and your work on the winter webs?
Sure, yeah. So you can find me at by Odin's Beard RPG on Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram. You can also go to my website, which is byodinsbeardrpg.com. That's where I have all my links and all links to different social media. Um, and yeah, I'm around on Discords as well. Um,
Yeah.
and I'll be all around. I'll be at lots of different places when the Kickstarter launches in 9 days, or on
Oh
the
yeah,
23rd.
Kickstarter is coming very soon, and probably when this podcast is released, it's probably out there. So we're gonna put links in the show notes. Go there and check this remastered edition of Runecairn, and it's a great game. And Colin does great art. And Colin, do you have any last messages for the weirdos out there that are listening to us?
Yeah, so there's a like a magazine and a Instagram account and a Twitter account called Weird Walk. So in their phrase is "keep walking weird." So I would absolutely suggest that people keep walking weird and look out for the weird things in life, because they're really interesting and a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. And then we're gonna check that out. And if you can take us out saying the catchphrase of the show, keep it weird, everybody.
All right, keep it weird, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Weird Games and Weirder People. If you'd like to keep up with the show, please subscribe to be notified when we release new episodes. If you'd like to support us, please leave a review or head on to code-fi.com/WGNWP. See you next time, and remember, weird is the new wonderful.